Welcome everyone, Womanjika, hola to all around the world. My name is Nora, and before we start, and on behalf of Regeneration Projects, we would like to take a moment to acknowledge country. We acknowledge Naim, Port Phillip Bay, as a living system that has supported life here for millennia. We acknowledge the Wurrung and Wunurong people of the Eastern Kulin Nation and their living connections to country through elders past, present, and emerging. In particular, we would like to honor the ancestors of the Mayumbalu clan, upon whose homelands our office is based here in the Mornington Peninsula in Melbourne. We acknowledge the migration paths of all of our ancestors as we come together tonight to talk about.
So keep going.
I'd like to acknowledge the Kabi Kabi Gobi Gobi people, the traditional custodians of Nusa, which is where I am right now, a different city from where offices are. And yes, welcome everyone. Very happy to have you all here. And for those who couldn't join us tonight and you're watching the recording, welcome and thank you as well. As you know, tonight is all about learning more about the fellowship. So you can expect we're going to go through a process of giving you the context and background and how this idea came to be. And what are those educational gaps that we're seeing in mainstream education and how we're trying to fill in those gaps. And of course, we're going to create some space for Q&As. And hopefully by the end of the session, you will have all of the information that you need to make a decision about joining us in the fellowship. And so that's it in a nutshell. But I would like to say that here at Regeneration Projects, we love to create connections and networks. We love to meet new change makers and all of this wave generation of ecological entrepreneurs. So we're going to create some space for some interaction where you can introduce yourselves very shortly and tell us what brings you here. Well, today I'm joined by Matt Sykes, who is the founder and chief regeneration officer at here Regeneration Projects, and he's going to be the main facilitator tonight. And well, without any further ado, Matt, take it away.
Beautiful. Womanjika, welcome and come with purpose, everyone. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Nora. And a big shout out to you as our programs coordinator that's making all of the back of house and the kind of the lead into the fellowship so smooth and easy for people to be able to connect and feel supported along that way. And I guess, super excited. I was saying to Nora before that this feels like a whole new chapter for Regeneration Projects in kicking off the Business with Nature Fellowship. And just building upon Nora's acknowledgement there, I just think it's super important to acknowledge where it is that we're each joining this conversation from, where you're listening from, to acknowledge the ecosystems that are connected to that place and the relationship that we have with those lands and waterways and skies, which sometimes it feels a little bit obscure or subtle or not clear in how that relates to our life and our work, but they're always there. There's always those services that are being shared. And that's the whole point of this space, is to become more aware of those and then to start to think about practical ways that they can then inform the way we go about our work. So I guess for me, where I am coming from is the lands traditionally known as the Boomerang and Bunurong country, which is the southeast of Naarm, or known more commonly as Melbourne, down in Australia. And just to also acknowledge our ancestors, to acknowledge each of the paths that have brought us here, the many paths that have brought us here into this conversation. Because again, I've spent a lot of time learning from First Nations elders, and I guess one of the key things that they've taught me is that understanding where we come from, understanding the connection to place of local people, but also the connection that we have to I guess our own ancestors, that some of them may be with us, some of them not with us. It's still super relevant, and they give us clues about how we might approach our steps forward at this time of disruption that is going on. So I just want to say a quick hello, big shout out to you all, and look forward to hearing some introductions in a moment. But I guess before we create some space to hear from you, I also wanted to just continue on what Nora was saying about those gaps in mainstream education that have, I guess, seeded and prompted this. So you might recall in some of the pre-fellowship communications that I shared a moment, I'll talk more about that at COP15, but really there is this often a big gap, these silos between, business and nature. If you're passionate about business, then it's strange to care about nature, and if you care about nature, then it's strange to care about business. But fortunately, that's changing, and what we felt like was that, having navigated a lot of these systems in, really well-regarded Western institutions internationally and locally, we felt like we needed to create a more of a dedicated space for ecological entrepreneurship and leadership, and to celebrate what that looks like in different places, because what that looks like in Africa and what that looks like in in Kenya as opposed to in South Africa or in Central Australia compared to Mendoza in Argentina, or all of these different places have their own specific characteristics that inform us. It's like soil, plants growing in soil. We each have our own habitat. And so when we acknowledge that, it brings us closer to Earth, because, you end up in an aware relationship. But then that becomes really practical on how you then relate to the seasons and make decisions with nature at the heart. Look, it's really nice just to hear from you all, and to acknowledge different geographic and cultural contexts that everyone's also coming from. But just to acknowledge, like, I'm proud of you, Ashwin, talking, coming from an ecosystem management background, and then Ibrahim, you're talking from a business management perspective where you haven't had formal study in, environmental work, but you've got a passion for it. And I just think it's such a clear example of wanting to bring those worlds together instinctively. And then the question is, like, how do we do that? And sometimes what happens is, and I'll share maybe more in a moment, but you kind of go through the system, and instinctively that's what you want to do. You want to bridge those worlds, but the system will actually, sometimes it can keep us separate, it can keep us in those silos. And so, we have to find creative, innovative paths. And through John, it's lovely to connect with you also. I know we've had some exchanges already before this, and it's great to hear. I think what jumps out for me in your story is that you're looking, almost the way I would interpret it is that you're looking for the conditions to grow as well as having the ideas, and you're giving value to that preparatory work that needs to be in place. So the metaphor that I'm often using on projects with clients is that you're cultivating the soil. Like, practically, you need to prepare the soil in order for things to grow. And again, that might sound strange, but then it's like, it makes total sense, right? Like, unless you do that preparation, unless you have that peer support around you with mentors and other people that are doing startups or initiatives at the same time, it can be quite lonely, it can be quite tough. And so if you can find a group where you're like, hey, like, I get them and they get me, it just helps things along so much. So yeah, thank you all for sharing. And perhaps I might just take this moment to talk a little bit about the background of, I guess, part of my own story in trying to navigate these worlds. So I grew up in a region called West Gippsland, which is roughly an hour to the east. Well, it's a bit longer now, but an hour to the east of Melbourne. And it's traditionally known for dairy farming, conventional dairy farming, and to be honest, also coal mining. And right now, the region is going through an ecological and economic transition, which is fantastic. And I was speaking to some of the economic development organizations about what we do just in the last couple of days, and seeing how we can support them potentially. But when you're describing to someone that you come from a place that the two things that it's mostly known for is conventional dairy farming, which can, there's a lot of great, farming people in the community, but there's also some quite damaging aspects of that. And then coal mining, we know that Australia's, position on coal and energy historically has been really, really lagging. And so I guess those things influenced me. When I then went to university, I studied landscape architecture, and I got straight into starting my own business and working with farmers and gardeners, and it was really, really great. And then I got exposed to business through reading a book by the founder of Patagonia, Yvon Chouinard. I know that there's thousands of people that have probably got a similar story, but for me, that book turned on a light bulb and made me realize that, hey, business really can do some good things for the environment, and that it can actually make your business better when you do that. So I ended up going across to Europe, and eventually ended up in a course, a postgraduate diploma in entrepreneurship at Cambridge in the UK. I was really fortunate to have that opportunity, and again, I looked at a different world, and it was quite conservative and traditional. But along this pathway, in the background, and as a really strong learning path, was having time with Indigenous elders in different parts of Australia and also in North America. And so from early in my career, I got exposed to different ways of seeing, different worldviews, different language, different ways of relating to the land and the water. And I guess what I've done, and what we're doing now, is trying to weave those together. And so, Ibrahim, I totally relate. Regeneration Projects is 3 years old as well. Like, we were a COVID baby, I call it. We were able to bring together elders from different parts of the world through an initiative called the Fire Circle that Nora and I both collaborate on. And I guess that's a great way to just acknowledge that alongside Nora and I, we also have Shruti Vijaya Kumar, who has Indian heritage but lives in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and also Ash Bartley, who is based here in Melbourne, but she's a Wamian woman, First Nations woman from up in northern Queensland in Australia. And so all the four of us will be here supporting people on this journey in the fellowship. And I guess the Fire Circle, the way that we brought elders together in these online environments, was just another example of being able to lean on and be supported by, and to respect the knowledge of First Nations people, and all of those people that are closest to the land. Like, it could be your uncle, it could be your sister, it could be your mum, it could be your auntie, it could be that neighbor. But those people in your life, and they just have a really close connection to nature, and they don't always get a platform. They don't always get that respect that sometimes we feel they deserve. But I guess where it ended up was realizing that the things that I had learned by being exposed to both the Western as well as the Indigenous and some Eastern worldviews as well, other people weren't seeing those things in the same way that I was seeing. And I realized that it helped me so much. It gave me so much grounding. It gave me so much more resilience. It gave me different tools to draw on. It gave me a much deeper understanding both of business and of nature. And so that's what the fellowship's about. It's about weaving those together and creating a platform for entrepreneurs that are out there already doing things, to be able to share those stories with you along this fellowship. And perhaps we can go through a bit more of the flyer. We can go a little bit further. So this is the first time that we've run the Business with Nature Fellowship, but there's been a lot of stepping stones to come along here. And I guess you see in the image the Birrarung, or the Yarra River, that's based here in Melbourne, Australia. That beautiful river used to be more like a chain of ponds, and then a series of interventions through the process of colonization have meant that it's a different water body now. But still, it's such a critical lifeblood for our community, and acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung peoples connections to that place. But you'll also see the artwork that's connected to that. And so that's a boomerang artist, David Tornier. David and I work quite closely on a number of initiatives. And then you can see, some of the things that we're aligned to. So the decade on ecosystem restoration, that's convened by the United Nations. We're a B Corp, so it means that we've got that independent certification of the impact that we have, both with community and environment, and 1% for the planet as well, which means that we support a number of grassroots frontline environmental organizations. But it is about growing the next generation of ecological leaders and entrepreneurs. So I guess just to touch here the story of David's artwork, I reached out to him. I said, "Oh, David, we're doing this fellowship and it's about, doing business with nature." And I was thinking about using the connection to, I think I actually used a Banksia, which is this plant here. It's a plant that needs fire to regenerate. And so when a fire comes through, the seeds will be protected in the cones, and then it will, when the rains come through, it opens up and it starts to germinate. It starts to spark. And he said, we could do that, but I think you should use the grass tree, because the grass tree, which is this one in the middle here, and then some others, links to that fire, and we use it as a fire stick, and it's got these different significances. And so he came up with this idea of this passage with a group growing in numbers, but all of the diversity of perspectives that are brought to that fire that make it stronger. And I think that's the spirit that we want to create in this group. So the fellowship itself, if I zoom in here, it is a 9-month action-oriented leadership program for purpose-driven leaders and ecological entrepreneurs. So it's going to be a very immersive, very transformational experience. So it's for people that want to kind of give themselves up to that process and have it run alongside other things that you might be working on, whether it be, a full-time job that you're looking at a different perspective on, or whether it's that startup that you've got and it's ready to cultivate that new idea. So we'll run from March to November, and you can see the dates here from the middle of March to the middle of November, with monthly sessions happening. And then in the beginning and at the end, we have basically a kickoff or a grounding session, and then a debrief and a closing transition session. All up, we're looking at about 4 to 6 hours per week. There'll be a little bit more in the beginning, so at the upper end of that, just because you'll be doing the fellowship, and then you'll also be doing the Regen roadmap, which is part of the first phase, and I'll talk about that at the moment. So the time zones, you can see we tried to create as much space between where we are down in Australia and Aotearoa, New Zealand, and of course moving up to Asia, which shares a lot of our similar time zone, but to folks across in Africa and Europe and everywhere in between. So we have about 18 places available, and there's different entry points in terms of pricing that we feel like that's really, really important. So don't be put off if it is more that scholarship option. If you're a student, or if you're in an environment where you need that support to get going, then absolutely we're here to create pathways that facilitate that. So I guess we just acknowledge that in certain parts of the world there are more resources or different currencies and different values. It's not more resources in value, it's just some of the inequality that we have throughout the world. So we do want to create space for people from different backgrounds to come into this. So that's really, really important. The benefits, this has already come up, but yeah, that community of like-minded people, the regeneration model that you'll get for your enterprise will be part of the core IP that you develop out of this. You'll end up with a toolkit of a whole bunch of resources, benchmarks, and you'll also get the practical application of this, because there's a clear piloting phase where we're saying, okay, you've got enough knowledge now, or you've got some more knowledge now take that step, start putting into practice and start learning and iterating. That's always the way that we operate here in regeneration projects, and the really successful businesses and leaders that we've worked with often work in very similar ways. It also invites you to be supported by experienced mentors to deepen your own connection with nature, because I guess without that, that's the main thing. To be honest, nature can teach us more than any structured program that you can get in something like this or at university. And my First Nations colleagues and other people that are close to nature are always reminding us of that. But it is about these specific enterprises or projects that you've got and you're looking to grow. So it's different from some courses that are about professional and personal growth in general. This is about application to creating something. So the background at COP15, end of last year, there was a moment where, and Pratyush, thanks for bringing this up. So there's a moment where there's a lot of conversation being had, and it was in the second week over in Montreal, and it was as part of the opening session of the 2-day business conference. And they opened up. What I loved about the space that they created is that they would always open up to the floor to have questions and things. And there was a pause of silence, and I was just like, oh, I've got to say something. And for me, what I felt strongly at that point was that they were talking about the transition of an older generation of business and trying to retrofit that, trying to change and adapt that, rather than acknowledging the wave of entrepreneurship that's coming up, often from the grassroots, that has nature, that has purpose embedded into it from the beginning. And so I had to put it out there. I had to call that out. And then I had to also make myself accountable to follow up and do something about it. So I guess here, just to look at the experience, there's different phases. So we've got the ecological business knowledge, which is anchored in the Regen roadmap, which is based on our 5 capitals model. Very briefly, it talks about natural capital as a foundation for all business. So those ecosystems, raw materials, ecosystem services. Then you've got well-being capital, connections to community, cultural capital, which is really about celebrating diversity and harnessing diversity. And then material capital, which is then all of your flows, including carbon, including all of your circular economy considerations. And then we've got intellectual capital, which is about knowledge. You know, we always forget knowledge, and that includes policies. It includes, legal, dynamics, and it includes systems. It includes accounting systems. All of these things that can help support this regeneration process. As I said, it then comes over to practice and piloting. So after a couple of months of foundational knowledge, we get into the piloting. Then we step into really important part, which is about that next generation leadership. How can we expect to create different businesses unless the people leading and managing those businesses don't come from a different place themselves? And so that's creating space for you to explore that and to be supported and to grow. Startup planning is then, okay, we've got some foundational knowledge. We've started practicing and piloting. I've started to think about what I need to do from a personal leadership perspective and how I can support others in my team. Now I need to practically start mapping out that next step of startup. It might be a 2.0 or it might be a 1.0 for your business. And these are some of the learning pillars. I won't go through those in detail because you can come back and have a look at this. But the inclusions, I think this is important. We've got that introductory session and the debrief session. We've got the 7-week Regen roadmap, which are kind of short 75-minute sessions that run on Tuesdays. And then on the Wednesday, we have our monthly workshops. And in between the workshops, mentoring sessions where you get that personalized support. So the intensive workshops are very much peer-to-peer focused. Mentoring is a bit more personal and supporting you to grow. And then, of course, it's up to you. You know, no one can start the business for you, but they can support you. And so it's about getting the balance right of each. And then alongside this, we wanted to make sure that there was some additional resources. So the connections to First Nations knowledge, and it's very likely that we'll have First Nations speakers that come in the different workshops. But we wanted you to have access to the seasonal fire circle gatherings that we'll have around the equinoxes and at the solstice in the middle of the year. So that can give you first-hand connection and a really culturally safe space to learn from and hear from different First Nations elders. And then there is a retreat that's coming up that will be based in Australia. And it's likely that we'll be in Northeast Arnhem with one of the elders that we have a close connection with in the Yolngu community. But those that are doing the program, if they have the interest, then that might also create another stepping stone. Or you might do something in your own region. You might adapt that and do something in your own backyard. Eligibility. Look, I think we're after so many different people. All of you and the stories that you've shared absolutely resonate, but there's absolutely many hats that can be worn. People that are working on policy, and they're working on a specific policy that they think could be a game changer. Nature rights is a massive thing. That could be a project. Natural capital accountants could be developing a new software system or something that can support entrepreneurs in managing their impact. All of these different things. So I guess just to finish, the expressions of interest are obviously open now. We've had them informally open for well over a month now, perhaps even up to 2, but we do want to keep extending that just a little bit longer. Our first round offers will come out at the end of February, and then we'll go through that interviewing before offering the program at the beginning of March. And Sophia, you can read, is someone that did our Regen roadmap. She did actually an internship with Regen projects as well. She came out of the Regen roadmap with a model. She then went back home to the Philippines and said, all right, I'm going to test this. And she's now coming back and she's going to jump into the fellowship as the next step. So it's a very practical example of someone that is out there doing and learning, but also just enjoying the benefits of the support. And sorry, this is where I will finish. The guest speakers are so much of a part of this. So you can see the guide team here. Shruti is absolutely amazing. She did her MBA at Oxford Said Business School over in the UK, but spends a lot of time in India, and also time in Argentina and Aotearoa, New Zealand. Ash here from Australia, amazing ability to communicate and work between different knowledge systems. And Nora as well, has so much experience that's really come such a long way in the last couple of years. But it is about learning from people and people that have been there before. And these are just a small sample of the people that we'd like to bring into this program. But Natalia Alexeva from UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, Scott Fry, Loving Earth is an organic chocolate brand based here in Australia, working with folks in Latin America, suppliers. Jane and Ariadne do some incredible work in nature markets and different changes in carbon and biodiversity credits. Geordie and Julia, they have a biodegradable cling wrap company that's used for domestic home use and also industrial use. And then Shah Love at Natura, one of the largest B Corps out there. Christian Moller Holst from Copenhagen works with Goodwings. So really looking at that travel and carbon space for business in particular. Nicole is someone that we've worked with down at Meetung Hot Springs. She's their wellness and regeneration manager. Ashley Orgain is the chief impact officer at Seventh Generation. So a really, amazing organization doing some great work based in the UK. Alex Pryor at Guayaki, being the yerba mate drink, the herbal tea drink company, working with communities in the Amazon and finding ways that benefit Indigenous communities, Indigenous forests, as well as the people receiving the specific teas and things. Carlos Manuel Rodriguez, the CEO at the Global Environment Facility, an incredible person working in international nature finance. He's also got a strong connection to the ground, having a background as a ranger himself. So a lot of these people, they're very successful in their different ways, but they have the ability to work from the grassroots up to different levels. And that's what we feel is so important. Partho is an amazing elder that we work with based in New Delhi. Incredibly inspiring, amazing, profound teacher. Sean Wilmore from the Thin Green Lime Foundation, a close friend, a mentor, someone that works very closely with rangers. He used to be the president of the International Ranger Federation, so working with protected areas and supporting those people at the front line. And then lastly, Kong Jan Yu or Dr. Yu, is the head of Turenscape, a landscape architecture firm based in Shanghai in China. I met Dr. Yu back in 2011, and his ability to work at ecosystem restoration at large scale and connect communities to those ecosystems, I think is just an incredible example, and also creating incredible number of jobs as well. And this is an important part of this, is that like was shared earlier, like having the theory, having the concepts, then putting it into practice, creating those jobs and careers is such an important part of this. So just I hope you get a sense of the spirit, the energy, the passion of these people, and the diversity of skills that they have. So I'm going to pause there. There's the 5 capitals model. I'll let you go through that in your time, but I'll pass back to you, Nora, and perhaps we can go through some questions.
That was fantastic. Thank you, Matt. I would just like to highlight that all of these speakers are absolutely amazing, because everything they're doing in their businesses is based on putting Earth at the center of their strategies and decision making, etc. So that's why we have invited them, just so you have a sense of the real world, all those case studies, that everything that is already happening and how you can learn from those pioneers. So super important. Yes, let's create space for some questions if you have. If you are ready, just unmute yourselves, or you can also put them in the chat.
So I guess this becomes up to you, to decide on your own personal capacity. But for those, there's a couple of different pathways here. So one of them is to do the full 9-month fellowship. There is also an alternative for those that can't commit to that long a period, to do a 7-week Regen roadmap on its own. So of course the Regen roadmap is part of the fellowship experience, but for those people that have time constraints and managing different workloads, an alternative is to do the 7-week program. So I think one of the things with the fellowship itself is that it really is spaced out with monthly sessions, and those happen at a similar time to when we're talking now, which means that it's out of hours of other things, which is one way of making it accessible for those of us in Melbourne and this region. I think the other thing that's important is that a lot of the learning materials are available online as we go, so you can access them as you need to. And then the same with the Regen roadmap. When you're doing that, a lot of the learning materials online, so you can kind of pace it as you go. So if you have a busy week and you need to come to the class, but you haven't done as much preparation, you can catch up next week, those resources are going to be there for you. So I think it's quite an adaptable way of learning, but at the same time, it's there's still work to do. So I think if we're really keen to support people that are up for the challenge, but I guess if someone doesn't have that full capacity, then we'll support you in other ways. We'll find another way through the Regen roadmap or other things. All right. Well, look, I'm just really mindful of time, and we can hang on for a few minutes at the end, but if anyone needs to leave on the hour or the half hour, depending on where you are, then let's start to do this. But I guess just from my side, and Nora will close out, just want to thank you all for expressing your interest and also stepping in, and just so that we can spend some time together even today. It's amazing to hear about your stories, and I feel like all of your stories and the things that you're thinking and working on are great examples of what we're seeking to support through the fellowship. So we're glad that the course has found you, and yeah, look forward to being able to go through your expressions of interest. I think all of you have already done that, I hope, and yeah, and then we'll be in touch. Maybe Nora, you can share a few of those next steps.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I just wanted to finish with those important dates, just so you have in mind how the process is going to be. And when can you expect to receive an email from us saying this is the next steps and this is the next step. But most importantly here, I wanted to let you know that if you haven't expressed interest and now you're ready to express interest, you can go onto the link that I'm going to provide just now. And we're going to do a selection process, and we're going to have some interviews, which is, more like a chat that we have had here, very casual. 15 minutes, 20 minutes, just to learn more about you and what your project is, etc. Just to make sure this is, the right fit, and learn ways how we can really support you. And after that process, we will confirm participants, and we are looking at starting on 15th of March, which is a little bit more than a month. But expect to hear from me via email. Any questions you have, please feel free to reach out. I'm here to support.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nora. So I guess on that note, thanks again. Lovely to meet you, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.